morning. This morning I'm going to be talking about Agni Yoga and the future. It really is interesting to have been part of these teachings for so many years and to see those on this path, how our approaches are so different, to the teachings. Some people are so totally absorbed in the written word, and they've read the Agni Yoga series and the 2 volumes of Letters of Helena Rourke, and some have read At the Threshold of the New World, and they love it. They love the words. They love the teaching. And then there are others that have read maybe one book, out of the 14 or 15 in the series, and they practice that path more than those that have read all the books. And then there are those that listen. They attend lectures and listen to what others have to say about Agni Yoga, and they totally incorporate it into their life without reading a word. It's like, perhaps you could call it the oral tradition of today's society. It really, to me, the most important point of being on the path of Agni Yoga is to allow the light, the fire of Agni Yoga to expand our consciousness, to put us into a world of thinking about the future, which is what I'm talking about this morning, Agni Yoga and the future. To think about the future and not to dwell in the past, not to hang on to the past ideas, past this and that, which keeps bringing us back incarnation after incarnation after incarnation into the old ways of thinking. Sometimes people say they look at the little ones that by the age of 1 year old, they already have their passwords and their iPads and their iPhones, and they're telling grandma and grandpa, how to use it. It's terribly embarrassing. Anyway, I oftentimes wonder if these aren't children that were so futuristic in their thinking that as they came into their next incarnation, it was common, it was natural, it is common, it is natural for them to be so technologically oriented. So that's telling us something is going on in the higher worlds in regard to technology that these little ones are now born to bring to us to understand. So, you're not going to find a 1-year-old talking about the Smith Corona typewriter. They don't even know what that old typewriter was. They don't even know typewriters started out with no electricity. They don't know, remember those IBM fonts, those balls that we had in these wonderful little plastic containers, and we would pick out which, font we wanted to use. Just took up a lot of space, took a lot of time to type anything make it into a document, because you had to have onion skin paper and multiple copies, and then you made a mistake and you had to have white out, and oh my gosh, these little kids will look at you and think you're crazy. And we look at them and say, how do you know technology at your young age? So not all 1-year-olds or 5-year-olds are like that, but the majority are. So let us put ourselves in that position of when we come back into our next incarnation, we're not going to teach Smith Corona to humanity. Probably not even Microsoft Word. But the next stage. So The next stage for Agni Yoga, we are told, is going to begin in 2025. 2025. So some of us are madly trying to wrap up and manifest the unpublished writings of Agni Yoga and letters of Helena Rourke. So by the time 2025 comes, we'll be ready to be introduced to this new life being poured into Agni Yoga, the future of Agni Yoga. Each teaching comprises its own yoga. When I first read that in the teaching, I was so excited because I always thought yoga was yoga. You know, you got your leotards back in the day, and you would go to the yoga studio, and you would put your legs and arms and back and everything twisted into this weird pretzel, and that's what they taught in the East and brought it to the West, how to twist your body into various weird forms, and it's called yoga. That was my perspective. And of course, we weren't allowed to talk about yoga in the family because it was Eastern, not American. and there was a conflict between Eastern thinking and Western religion. So I'm trying to tie all this together. So we have grown a great deal since then, and this really stood out to me when I first read that each teaching comprises its own yoga, and Agni Yoga is no different. So we have the term Agni Yoga, but we also have the term the teaching of living ethics. So Agni Yoga is the yoga of the teaching of living ethics. The yogas do not contradict each other. We're told that as the branches of one tree, they spread their shade, and they refresh the traveler exhausted from heat. This is a quote from the book Agni Yoga. Therefore, we must understand and hail the most ancient yoga, Raja Yoga. Found that interesting. And the master goes on to say, and we affirm the future Agni Yoga. So this was from the preface of Agni Yoga. Last Sunday, I said that Agni Yoga is the yoga of advanced consciousness. So a good question is for us to ask ourselves and to think about, what does this mean? What does it mean that Agni Yoga is a yoga of advanced consciousness? It is the yoga of those who concern themselves with their future. So if I guess by default we could say, all right, so if people are still immersed in Hatha Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Raja Yoga, their consciousness is still learning and experiencing, but they're not futuristic. They're catching up with the past. Whereas an Agni Yogi is one who is concerning themselves with the future. Not tomorrow, not next year, but incarnations to come. So Agni Yoga is the yoga of those who concern themselves with their future. It is a yoga of those who have an inner impulse to strive on the path of purification and perfection. And why is that? Purification and perfection. Why bother? These are really basic questions to ask. But if you're on this path, or you want to step onto the path of Agni Yoga, these are questions you need to ask yourself, and then to decide if you can practice Agni Yoga or not. The path of purification, the path of perfection, and learn, what does it mean? It's like White Mountain had their conference last March, and the theme was on self-perfectment, on perfection. So we learned a lot about why an Agni Yogi is on the path of perfection, or perfectment, as that language is. For most people think the path of perfection is the path of financial accomplishment, power, and position. But the Agni Yogi does not. Perfection means the process of helping each cell, each atom in your entire being, each neuron in your entire being advance and evolve. Now, if we are on this path of purification and perfection, the reason is to unite our beingness with the fiery spheres of consciousness. The fiery spheres of consciousness are the spheres of the higher world. I was really touched yesterday when I sent out an announcement to some co-workers about the death of a friend of the group who worked for us for many, many years and died suddenly. And one of the responses from one of our members was, "May the higher worlds bless him." What a beautiful thought. And it went right into my heart, and I know in the heart of Enrique. May the higher worlds bless him. Agni Yogis are carriers of fire. So when she said, "May the higher worlds bless Enrique," she was carrying the fire within herself, within her heart, to the heart of Enrique, and connecting Enrique with the fires of the higher worlds. See how beautiful that is? Your core is a fire. In ancient teachings, those who lit their fires and possessed psychic energy were called carriers of fire. They experienced the fire in their nature as a fire of enthusiasm, the fire of creativity, the fire of purity, the fire of immunity and invincibility. And let me add to this list: enthusiasm, creativity, purity, immunity, and invincibility, beauty. If beauty diminishes in your life or in the life of humanity, the beauty of the planet is going to diminish as well. We could say just the opposite. If the beauty of the planet diminishes, so will your beauty. We, as Agni Yogis, want to bring beauty back into the planet, back into your personal life, back into your family life, back into your writings, even to the tonality of your voice. As a musician, I like to listen to the tonality of people's voices. And I remember this is a dear friend. She's no longer alive, but she had the most beautiful voice, melodic voice. And people would just come and listen to her. They didn't hear a word she said. They just wanted to listen to the tonality, the quality of her voice, because it was so beautiful. I think that beauty is diminishing in the tonality quality of people's voices because their intellect is overriding the beauty of tonality of the person's voice. They become very terse, very clipped in the way they talk. And I have to be careful myself not to be like that, because it's very easy to mirror and imitate those that you are around. So when I hear my voice becoming like that, I remember the tonality of my very, very dear friend and how deep and beautiful and melodious her voice was, and try to bring that back. Many years ago, a beautiful but naive teacher told me that he felt the consciousness of people never change. He said they may read many books, they may travel and experience the world, but their consciousness never changes. I was shocked, and I was young, so I believed every word he said. But over the years since that time, I've learned the opposite, that the consciousness of people can change. But such changes are very slow and gradual. To change your consciousness requires certain things. The first thing is to desire change. The next is to have a readiness to change. So desire, and then readiness, and then an awakening. These three go together: desire, readiness, and awakening. The desire won't be there if you don't have an awakening experience. Once you have an awakening experience, like an aha moment, then the desire to change will be there. That desire gives way to readiness. And finally, you begin striving for these changes, change in consciousness, transformation. Leonard Bernstein, a well-known composer and conductor and a pianist and educator, he was also a longtime music director of the New York Philharmonic, where he led the highly successful young people's concerts. He wrote, and I quote, "I believe," he said, "that man's noblest endowment is his capacity to change. I believe in the potential of people. I cannot rest passively with those who give up in the name of human nature." He wrote, "Human nature is only animal nature if it is obliged to remain static. Without growth," he said, "without metamorphosis, there is no Godhead." He said, "I believe in people. I feel, love, need, and respect people above all else, including the arts. One human figure," he wrote, "on the slope of a mountain can make the whole mountain disappear for me. One person fighting for the truth can disqualify for me the platitudes of centuries." I wanted to share Leonard Bernstein's beliefs with you because I think his beliefs mark an awakened consciousness, to say the least. We are never too young or too old to undergo the process of sublimation, transformation, and transfiguration. Doesn't what he wrote inspire you? He was a great musician and a great man. Agni Yoga was presented to the world in 1922 by the Master M and other masters through Nicholas and Helena Rourke. Let me share a little of the history of how this came about. There were first many scraps of paper, which Nicholas Rourke recorded at MM's instruction, and then he would assemble them along with others. He would copy them into notebooks. Sometimes Helena Rourke did, sometimes Nicholas Rourke did, and I've seen those original scrolls. They're huge. They're like, this wide, and then they're rolled up into, a scroll type, and when you unfold it, it just keeps going. These are long scrolls, and the writing, Nicholas Rourke's writing is huge. It's like that. It's so big. I could just imagine what it must have been like back then. Helena Rourke's questions to the master were written in red ink, and the replies given were in black, all meticulous and neat. And we, in fact, have those papers, so you can see the difference between the black and the red. There are more than 40 notebooks at Amherst College, Massachusetts, in the library, which were photocopied for us at one point, and which we are now making plans to publish once they're translated and edited. In the beginning, while the Rourkes were in America, back in 1922, Nicholas Rourke was involved equally with Helena Rourke. Most of the material in the Leaves of Moria's Garden, called The Call, the first book of the series, was written down by Nicholas Rourke. Nicholas Rourke used to write on paper scrolls, the kind that artists used to buy to sketch on. The Call consists mainly of instructions and replies given to the Rourkes themselves and to the members of the first study group in New York City. When the group met, or when the Rourkes were together in their own home, with or without others, everything that was said was written down. It appears that Helena Rourke participated less in the beginning, and Nicholas Rourke more, with the transmissions. Eventually, all those transmissions, as I said, were written into notebooks, and from them came the Agni Yoga series. The Agni Yoga Society in New York has these scrolls in their archives. After the Rourkes left America in 1923, Helena Rourke took on the task of writing down all the books. So Agni Yoga is the yoga of fiery synthesis. This means that as you make a conscious commitment to undergo spiritual purification by means of striving toward perfection or perfectment, you will begin to release this fire, this Agni, fire from within the core or the essence of your being. You will begin to consciously release the fire that resides within your capital S self. This is what it means to strive, to purify, and to undergo the process of perfectment. It releases the fire from the core of your being. The practice of fiery synthesis is a progressive unfoldment to the future synthesis. And that future synthesis is called freedom in harmony, as opposed to harmony through conflict. Freedom in harmony. When an Agni Yogi talks about future, they are talking not about next week, not about next year, and not necessarily even about the next life. The yogi is talking about the spiritual future. The spiritual future is your unfoldment. It is the evolution of your spark, the evolution of your soul. This is why I was thinking of just again about our dear co-worker saying, may the higher worlds bless. It's a very powerful statement. The spiritual future is our unfoldment, the evolution of our soul. So how does the Agni Yogi progress? Through 3 fires. The fire by friction, the fire called solar fire, and the fire called electric or spiritual fire. But in reality, we must know that spirit is fire. The core of our being is fire. So in order for our spirit to progress, it is going to progress through all 49 planes of fire, 49 spheres, 49 planes or spheres of consciousness. As spirit progresses through these 49 planes of consciousness, our core is going to undergo higher and higher levels of creativity. So there are 3 main qualities, we are told, to create a fire. The first is creativity being the first quality. Creativity is the first quality of fire. Creative fire. Creative fire. Creativity brings in the archetypes or brings in forms into manifestation. That can be a human form, it can be an art form of some kind, it can bring in a new star, it can bring in a new planet. This is all possible through the creative fire. The intention of this fire is to make the purpose of each form reach fulfillment by progressively encouraging your essence to go ahead and to meet the requirements of your purpose or the purpose of your form. Is this making sense to you? Do you understand it? The second quality of fire is constructiveness. So now we're taking an idea, bringing it into form, whether it is a baby, whether it is a star, whether it is a planet, whether it is a galaxy. Now we're going to construct it in such a way that this form is going to be goal-fitting. The form must be goal-fitting. This is why Agni Yoga in all of the series talks about the importance of goal fitness. This means we have, through the process of goal fitness, a relationship to fulfill a plan. And the third quality of fire, this is interesting, is called destructiveness. This destructive fire destroys obstacles. It destroys walls. It destroys crystallized forms. It's like when our body gets too old to be of any use, we explode and we move to the higher worlds, and then we come back as a brand new baby with new bones and new eyes and hear better, and yeah. So it's positive. So the positive side of this destructive fire is that it destroys crystallized form that keeps our spark, our spirit, in captivity. That keeps us from progressing. So for a higher level of creativity, we need to raise the level of our consciousness in order to penetrate into the higher level of fire. This asks a lot from us because it requires that we must assimilate. We must assimilate that next sphere of spiritual fire. And it can hurt. It can burn. It causes disruption in our thinking, in our physical life. It causes disruption in our relationships because we don't know. We're not familiar. We don't understand it. It creates chaos in our whole physical, emotional, mental, spiritual being. So what happens when we go into the next sphere of spiritual fire, because the next stage of transformation begins to take place for that particular level of consciousness. This means our physical etheric body will undergo transformation. Our emotional body will undergo transformation, as well as our mental body. And what happens, unless you're an Agni yogi, if you are not, what will happen is you're going to default into the past. You're going to fight to repeat your habits. You're going to fight to be the way when you were a child. You're going to fight to bring everything you loved when you were growing up back into your life. But this fire is saying, no, no, no. Let's break up these old crystallized forms, release you from this confinement, and evolve. Transform yourself. If we can undergo and allow this transformation through the process of perfection, purification, striving to take place, we will move into the higher spheres of consciousness. Some call it the spiritual triad, others call it the holy triad. It is when the yogi is able to function at this level of consciousness, they can create new forms of expression of fire. When you progress, you need higher fires, and it is toward this goal that an Agni yogi strives. I mentioned earlier the three fires: fire by friction, solar fire, electric fire, which are three divisions of the fire taught in esoteric literature. Fire by friction creates movement. Remember when you were a kid? Maybe I was too much of a kid before you were a kid. So we had these sticks that were bumps, they had little grooves in this one stick, and there was a fan at the end of the stick. And then you took this other stick and you rubbed it back and forth, and that momentum allowed the little fan at the end of the weird stick to start flying round. That's fire by friction. I've always remembered that. Okay, now I get it. I get that. Did you ever have anything like that to play with? See, you're too young. Okay. Or maybe it's because you're not from Iowa. We had that. It was all over Iowa. So fire by friction is the nourishment of life. It makes things move. It makes us uncomfortable and yearn for progress. And soon we find that we need to begin making changes in our life in order for the process of transformation to take place, as the friction becomes more and more evident. At this level, we stay for many, many lifetimes until we allow all the fires of friction inspire us in such a way that we no longer want to live an ordinary life. This division of the fire by friction, relates to our personality bodies. Personality bodies, the three bodies: physical, emotional, lower mental bodies, and corresponding planes. As we undergo the fire by friction, our human soul slowly comes into being. Solar fire is the next division of fire, which is a mental fire that causes enlightenment and expansion of consciousness. So, repeating myself here, the fire by friction takes many, many lifetimes to bring the soul forward, to shape the soul, to get it ready, to release itself from the containment of the physical, emotional, mental body and move into a higher sphere of fire, which is solar fire. This solar fire causes enlightenment and expansion of consciousness. It is like a bridge between your personality and your spiritual beingness. As solar fire is ignited within our mechanism, the love energy begins to unfold. So, I won't have time if I get into that. Never mind. So the love energy begins to unfold, or in the teaching we would say the petals of love from our chalice begins to unfold. And then the third division of fire is electrical fire, which comes from the central spiritual sun. See, most of this is just too abstract, but that's okay because we're talking about our future. You know, you're not expected to understand it, but you're creating a recording now in your brain that when you begin to experience the fire coming from this central spiritual sun, it will be like your old friend. You'll recognize it, you'll understand it. This division of fire is related to your capital S self. As we go through the three qualities of fire and the three divisions of fire, it becomes very apparent that an Agni yogi is going to be a fiery person in all that they do and say, in all of their actions, in all of their work, in all of their service, in all of their striving. The Agni yogi is going to become themselves by passing through what? Fire. Fiery transformation. The physical body will be purified to the highest degree. Finally, the person will be electrical. This is goal fittingness. This is the goal. It is at this point we no longer think of age and so forth. We no longer think of, I am getting older. Although people tend to want you to think that way, and so they treat you old and feeble because you're old. Because you're old doesn't mean you're feeble, that you can't think, you can't do, that you can't create. So stop treating old people like that. Stop thinking of yourself that way. If you're an Agni yogi, we no longer think of age and so forth. We no longer think of, I'm getting older, I can't do this or that, or I'm filled with the limitations because of my age, which you're going to do, saying, okay, if I can't do that, now I can do this. Nothing, of course, which relates to reality, to the reality of the immortality of the soul. As we strive on this path of the future, we are eventually going to become the fiery self. It's like when I've had so many friends die, including my son this year, that it's like, where do you put it in perspective? Where I put it in perspective is I can hardly wait until we meet again. The beauty of meeting again. When, gosh, this is so cool. I mean, this is a personal story, but when I was in college, going to the University of Iowa, and was in the sorority, and there was a, what do they call him, that houseboy there, and he was the greatest guy. We really hit it off. We became good friends. He would take me out to go places that I could never go by myself because I couldn't do this or that. But I trusted him, so we would go get into trouble. And when I went home, I told Mom and Dad about, this houseboy, this great friend, and they just nearly died saying, do you know that you guys played together when you were 3 and 4 years old? He was a year older than me, and I would sit in this little red wagon, and he would pull me from through one block to the other block to the other block. We were the best friends. So we met together, and we didn't even know it, that we were old friends. When we work, no, let me back up. There's involutionary and evolutionary. There is destruction and construction. If we stay on the involutionary path, we're going to fall into conflict, into a battlefield between the forces of involution and the forces of evolution, the forces of construction. The forces of evolution are the forces of construction. If we keep going to battle, this is how we invite suffering into our vehicles. Today we take a step backward. Tomorrow we take a step forward. The next day we take 2 steps backward. See how we're fighting. When we work against our own transformation, bringing destructive fire into our emotional, physical, mental vehicles, and then say, I don't feel good, we need to take a look at that. Because we took destructive things into our mechanism, and then we wonder what is happening. We have fiery emotions and fiery thoughts. We took a burning fire into our emotional nature. What does this burning fire do? It cleans hatred. When it's cleaning out hatred, what happens? We get sick. Hatred is fire. Jealousy is fire. We can create stomach ulcers because of the fire of jealousy, which eats at the walls of the stomach. Agni Yoga means transformation. It is a method by which we purify our physical, emotional, mental, spiritual system through fire, and then we stand in the fire. Christ once said to his disciples, if you really want to reach a higher state of consciousness, you must be baptized, not only by water, but by fire. Agni Yoga is the means of transformation, gradual sublimation, and transfiguration by fire. And in fire, to allow us to become fiery beings. Once we become fiery, we burn out all ugly thoughts and emotions. Meditation is how you can purify yourself. Certain tests and trials are part of the process of fiery purification. Self-denial, endurance, willpower, all of these are fire. Self-denial, endurance, and willpower. The Agni Yogi, as they consider the future, aspire toward Shambhala, the Father's home. Shambhala is the stronghold. It is the head center of the planet where the will of God is known. It is the highest measure because it leads the evolution of all kingdoms in nature. And let me take just a moment. I know that there is a video going around now on Facebook particularly, where there's this beautiful young woman talking about that how many people are now becoming warriors of Shambhala. And it's a beautiful, she speaks beautifully, is a beautiful woman, but she's making a mistake. She is saying that Shambhala has no physical existence, and that is wrong. So I took that down off of our Facebook page because it does have a physical existence. I've been there, I know it. I haven't been to Shambhala, but I've been to the entrance, 2 different entrances to Shambhala. So if you hear that video, if you see it, don't get caught up in the rhetoric, of what's being said. Part of it's true, but that is not true. All conscious evolution is directed toward Shambhala, toward that achievement. Shambhala is the future. It stands for the great revelations to come, for great achievements of human beings to come. Those who now function in Shambhala were once men and women like you and I. But throughout many centuries, they mastered life. This is our glorious future as well. Those who do not believe in Shambhala deny their own future. Once Christ said, "In the future you will do greater things than I did." This is a great affirmation of the future of the human being, of each of us, and of humanity. So that's Agni Yoga in the future. It's pretty powerful.